Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome into a brand new edition of Franchise Players. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson, back from summer break. We've been gone since, I think, the NBA Finals. So we've been gone since the first week of June. Hope everybody enjoyed their summer. We're in the middle of fall high school football. We've got a lot of that coming up here in a little bit with prep beat writer Marc Pruitt. He'll go through his top three prep games for this Friday night. And, of course, regular David Glenn from the David Glenn Show and North Carolina Sports Network. He'll stop by to talk about the nonsense that has become the ACC expansion by adding Cal, Stanford, and SMU to the footprint. And that'll be starting 24-25 academic year, which will be after this one. So we'll chop it up with DG legally, see how this all came about, and just kind of figure everything out. But before we do that, though, I wanted to introduce Antwan Staley. He is a beat writer for the New York Daily News, covering NFL, in particular the Jets and the Giants, but from the state of North Carolina. Just found out that he actually grew up here in the area where we are. What's up, Antwan? How you doing?
I'm all right. How you doing?
Doing pretty good, pretty good. I was looking for a fresh voice outside of the state of North Carolina to talk NFL talk, and I saw where you're going to be joining the Believe family here this season, covering NFL. Believe Network. I might have been with them since the very beginning when they first started in 2019, late 2019. I'm one of their older hosts, hosting Believe in Panthers with Jonathan Stewart and Skylar Callahan. Tell us a little bit, just real quick, tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing for Believe.
Just basically NFL. I'll have some Jets stuff in there as well, but just talking about the NFL as a whole, we'll have guests on there, probably like 20, 25 minutes, just breaking out specific teams or, going around the league, just looking at different stories, just hot button topics, things of that nature too. So yeah, you check it out. It's called the Back Page Breakdown, which is dedicated to, if you know about the New York Daily News or anything New York, really, They all have back pages that kind of separate all three major newspapers. So that's kind of what it's dedicated to. But yeah, it's going to be pretty fun.
And Believe has grown from where it was in the beginning when I joined up with them to what it is now, which is one of the leading content providers for sports and entertainment and all kinds of things. If you're looking for a podcast, Believe probably has something that'll match up with what you're looking for. Yeah. So definitely look for Backpage Breakdown with Antwan Staley on the Believe Podcast Network here for the 2023 NFL season. Let's go real rapid fire real quick. In the NFL, you do cover the New York Jets and the Giants. They just finished Hard Knocks. We just watched that last episode. But of course, here in the area, a lot of folks are still concentrating on that episode 3 when they took on the Carolina Panthers for the week. I actually went down to Spartanburg, tried to go to practice, but I was trying to get to that Thursday practice. They got rained out. So I basically went to South Carolina for nothing. So I didn't get a chance to see anything. Did watch a little bit of the preseason game. True or false? The Jets are the team to beat in the AFC in your mind?
No. I mean, it's still the Chiefs. I mean,
I meant the AFC East. I'm sorry, not just the AFC, just in their division.
No. The answer is still no. And the Bills, the Bills have won the division 3 years in a row. So until proven otherwise, they're the top dog. And I just think the Jets have been the media darling of the offseason. And we'll see. Jets and Bills, some Monday Night Football, week 1, and we'll see if they deserve to be in that conversation. But right now, it's still the Bills' division to win.
Do you did you I assume you watched Hard Knocks this season with it being on the Jets and you covering the team? Did you see anything on Hard Knocks that kind of took you by surprise? Because it felt like to me watching it this year, normally they kind of focus on a couple of like undrafted guys and their journey and that kind of thing. This year kind of felt more like it was about Aaron Rodgers. Like even if they were showing somebody else, they'd show that person and then they'd show Aaron Rodgers' reaction to whatever just happened. Like literally, it felt like it was just following him around. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, they do actually. I don't know what episode you have seen, but recently they have shown a couple of guys that were drafted free agents that have come
wide receivers. Yeah.
Jason Brownlee, Gibson there as well is Xavier Gibson, and also another wide receiver too as well. So yeah, they do touch on that a little bit. But yeah, everybody wants to see Aaron Rodgers. So I think that's just kind of the appeal of the Jets right now. So they're going to focus more on him than probably everybody else.
I'm not going to lie. I went into it thinking, you don't really need Hard Knocks anymore. Like every team has some sort of Hard Knocks type of knockoff for their team that's produced by the team. The Panthers have Camp Confidential, and you get an in-depth look at the team controlled by the team as opposed to HBO. But when they did this year, I'll be honest, it kind of changed my view on Aaron Rodgers a little bit. Like, we had always heard the stories that he didn't want to work with younger people, and he's aloof and a little out there and that kind of thing. That's kind of humanized him a little bit to me watching it. Did you come away from watching Hard Knocks feeling different about Aaron Rodgers from when he signed with the Jets?
No, because I've gotten to know him a little bit. So yeah, I think ever since he's been there, it's kind of been this person that I think everybody is seeing, somebody that's been willing to work with players. And even, you talk to some of his teammates that worked with him in Green Bay, that's how he was. I don't know how the narrative was that he didn't necessarily want to work with people because, he was banging on the table for Alan Lazard to get into the lineup even before, he became a starter on the offense. And, look at Alan Lazard, and now he's signed a 4-year, $44 million contract with the Jets. So, yeah, I definitely think that, it's just people have certain narratives they think about certain players. And I don't know if that's fair or unfair, but that's just kind of how it is.
The follow Antwan on Twitter at Antwan Staley, beat writer for the New York Daily News and now new Believe host. Definitely check out his new show, Backpage Breakdown, covering the entire NFL through the NFL season here on Franchise Players with us today. So you got a chance to see Panthers quarterback Bryce Young. And I know you said you're from this area. You're covering the Jets and the Giants up in New York. So you got a chance to see Bryce in action in terms of that week of practice and then the preseason game. Give me your thoughts on Bryce Young and the Panthers down here being a North Carolina native. I know you said you weren't a Panthers fan, but I know you're probably still kind of keeping track of what's going on down here. What are the vibes from outside of North Carolina in terms of Bryce and the Panthers and Frank Wright and this whole ordeal going on in Charlotte?
Well, I mean, I have two different perspectives. One being a North Carolina native, and two being somebody that's lives outside the area now. But from what I saw with Bryce, I thought he was really tremendous. Showed a lot of poise in the practice against the Jets too, as well. Not necessarily in the game where I thought the Jets offensive line was just able to dominate the Panthers offensive line, and I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing in the world because the Jets defensive line is stacked. I mean, it's like 8 deep, and it's one of the better defensive lines in the league. I think a lot of people, were freaking out about that because, this was the Jets, second unit really, but they were able to really control the line of scrimmage against the Panthers. But, I think Bryce is in a good place. I think he's in a good situation with Frank right there. Obviously you got Andy Dalton to bounce stuff off of from game to game and week to week and day to day. And, I think it couldn't be a better situation for him moving forward. And I think the Panthers have an opportunity to win the division, especially considering the state of the NFC South, where, still have questions with the Saints. Tampa Bay seems like they might be on the cusp of rebuilding with Baker Mayfield.
I think they're trying to get Caleb Williams. I think that's what Tampa's doing.
maybe, but I still think they're good. I think their defense is good enough to keep them in games too.
Yeah.
So I think their defense is still going to be pretty stacked. And Atlanta's a team to watch out too. But, I'm curious to see how Desmond Ridder performs in his first year under center.
Yeah, NFC South is interesting division. What would you say is the most stacked division, NFC or AFC right now? Like overall,
the conference.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's no division. Just like which division do you think is the toughest
out of the NFL divisions?
Yeah, out of both NFC and AFC.
I think it's only two of them that you really look at. I think it's the AFC North or in the AFC East. I think both of those divisions are really tough. You look at the AFC North, I think you can make the case for all four teams to make the playoffs out of that division, including the Steelers or the Browns. It's just a matter of can Deshaun Watson get back to his old form that we saw in Houston. And then Pittsburgh, I think it's going to be right there along with the Ravens and Cincinnati. AFC East, outside of New England, I think Miami, Buffalo, the Jets all have a realistic possibility of winning the division and also getting to the playoffs as well.
So I know it's the first week of September. We still got like 10 days to go before the season starts. But bold predictions from Antwan Staley. Can you sit here today and give me who you think would probably meet each other in February in the Super Bowl? Like what's the best case scenario for you in terms of who you would like to see in Super Bowl 57? I believe we're on now.
58.
58.
in there. Who I would like to see or who I think is going to be there. It could be two different questions.
Give me both. Give me both. Give me who you'd like to see, and then give me who you think is going to actually be there.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a horse in the race, although, you know, I don't, you know, but I think who I think is going to be there is Cincinnati and San Francisco.
Ooh.
I mean, I think, you know, a lot of people were picking the Chiefs, and, you know, you can't go against Patrick Mahomes. I think he's going to be there in the end, but it's so hard to repeat.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's done it since New England, you know, almost 20 years ago. So it's very, and that's for a reason. It's very difficult to do it. You know, even Tom Brady doing his, you know, reign of terror in the AFC only did it once. So that shows you how deep the NFL is from year to year. And, you know, even from game to game, anything can happen. And, you know, I think the Bengals, you know, so long as Burrow is healthy, you know, I think they've proven they can stay toe to toe with the Chiefs. And they even showed that, you know, at the course of the AFC Championship last year. So, yeah, I definitely think, you know, Cincinnati is there. I think the 49ers have a realistic possibility, especially with their defense. And, you know, it's just about the quarterback position. And can Brock Purdy continue to make that leap, you know, forward moving into this year.
Now, that's who you would like to see in the Super Bowl. That's who you think is going to actually.
That's who I think is going to be. Yeah, I mean, I don't.
You
I
don't
really don't care. I mean, you know, who's there? As long as it's a good game. You know, I was satisfied with the Chiefs and the Eagles, and I really don't care about either team. But it was an exciting game. It's one of the more exciting Super Bowls.
It was. You know what? You're right. And we kind of, I think you're around about the same age as me, and we kind of went through a stretch where there was about an 8-9 year period. It felt like where it was just like blowout city in the Super Bowl. It felt like every year, like the NFC had it for like a while where they were just dominating the AFC, and then it flipped, and the AFC did the same thing. And now it's kind of evened out where you're getting these exciting games. Really the past 3 or 4 years in the Super Bowl. I don't really know exactly yet for myself. I don't know if I'm completely bought in on just the 49ers and the Eagles being it in the NFC. Like Dallas has won 12 games the past 2 seasons. There's some other teams out there. Every year there's a team that pops up that wasn't there before.
Yes.
You know, there's always somebody that no one's talking about. And then all of a sudden they've won 10 plus games. They're in the playoffs. They're disrupting everything. And it's like a big surprise to everyone. I'm hoping it's my Panthers, but I don't know. I have no idea. But it could possibly come out of that NFC South. I'm also looking at Seattle as a surprise team because not a lot of people are talking or expecting them to do a whole lot. But it feels like Pete Carroll's kind of redoing the blueprint of how he built it when he first got there in terms of in the draft and certain positions that they're putting in there. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on Seattle too. Anything else before I get you out of here in terms of NFL storylines you're looking at as we enter the beginning of the season? Is there anything in particular outside of New York that you're kind of keeping an eye on?
I mean, definitely Jordan Love and see how he performs with the Packers there. I'm curious to see how the Vikings, may play this year. I mean, I know they looked really good at times last year, but that defense kind of let them down as well. I talked about the 49ers briefly too as well. And it seems like the Cardinals are headed on the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. So I definitely think
really
to see. They said publicly that they expect Kyler Murray to play this year. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen. If it does happen, then they might be so far out of contention that it might not matter anyway.
Yeah, because they got him on the PUP, right? So he can't play first 4 weeks at least. He's not going to be ready even after that, I don't think. So I don't know. That's something to keep an eye on. Arizona, they're in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes too. Follow Antwan on Twitter at Antwan Staley. Make sure you check out his work for Believe at Backpage Breakdown, the new podcast that'll be covering the entire NFL throughout the season. And we'll have Antwan back periodically to talk NFL stuff throughout the entire league. Appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming up, DG shows up. David Glenn's going to pop in and talk ACC expansion. Cal, Stanford, SMU voted into the ACC by the ACC presidents and chancellors on Friday. We'll talk pros and cons of why they're coming in and why this even happened in the first place. You're watching and listening to Franchise Players here on WWBG 1470 AM and WTOB 980 AM 96.7 FM.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome back into Franchise Players here on WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com, part of your TGI Friday lineup. It's our season premiere. I've been gone all summer long. A lot of stuff has happened since I've been gone. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson. David Glenn with us every other week in his slot here. Now host on the North Carolina Sports Network, which was launched while I was off on summer hiatus. What's going on, DG? Before we get into everything, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the North Carolina Sports Network that you guys started?
Yeah, Des, it's great to be with you as always. And yeah, I think this is my fifth startup of my 30-plus year career. And it's a lot of fun. You know, basically we have a website with a great name, ncsportsnetwork.com. So we are the North Carolina Sports Network. A great state like ours needs a great sports media outlet, and we're hoping to provide that. But it's not only a website with my articles and a lot of other cool stuff. We have a new YouTube channel. We have the David Glenn Show back in podcast form. We have a new statewide tailgate where we're traveling to, South Carolina against North Carolina in Charlotte this weekend. We're traveling to Clemson's visit to Duke on Labor Day night. We're traveling to the Aggie Eagle Classic later in September, and ECU's trip to App State and Boone. So there's that face-to-face tailgate tour aspect. There's the audio with the podcast. There's the video with the YouTube channel. We're all over social media, of course, but really our Grand Central Station is now the website there at ncsportsnetwork.com, and it just allows me to do on a bigger platform than the last couple of years, the stuff that I've been doing statewide in North Carolina since the 1990s.
I love it. And we'll talk after this about maybe that podcast, maybe entering some of our rotation here because it exposes it to a different audience here in the Triad, people that listen to you for years on terrestrial radio here in the Triad and across the western part of the state. So we'll definitely talk that. And I'm glad you mentioned the Aggie Eagle Classic because I actually am production partner with A&T. Tobacco Road is the home for North Carolina A&T Athletics. We will be doing the Aggie Eagle Classic on September the 9th. And that will be on WKEW, The Light, 1400 AM in Greensboro, and, of course, online at TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. I want to get into some ACC talk. Me and JP Mundy, good friend, works for Tobacco Road. He's the voice of Grimsley football at the moment. He is adamant that Florida State is going to leave the ACC and that the ACC is doomed, that they made a miscalculation with this grant of rights deal and that they didn't think far enough ahead. And it's going to be their downfall eventually. Just starting off, FSU, and I keep seeing Clemson linked into this, even though I haven't really seen anything from Clemson suggesting that they even want to leave. Can they legally leave? That's the question I want to ask, because I'm in the impression of, well, if they do, they're not going to have any money until 2036, because even if they leave, their TV rights stay with the ACC. Is that all correct? Like, they could leave, but they won't get any TV money for another 13 plus years or whatever. Isn't that how it works? Or am I completely wrong?
The starting point for all of this kind of conversation is you can always break a contract. The question becomes, what are the repercussions for breaking the contract? Mm-hmm. So the answer to could Florida State leave is yes. And Clemson, by the way, is similarly unhappy with the ACC falling so far behind financially to the Big Ten and the SEC. Those two leagues are making so much more money than everybody else. That's what's causing all of this indigestion, because the Big 12 and the ACC have had rising revenues too. It's just that they've been lapped by the two biggest super heavyweight conferences, and that makes people restless. So Clemson more privately, Florida State officials have been much more public with their threats to leave. But those are two of the schools that keep voting no on various expansion scenarios. But the bottom line is, if you want to leave contractually, it's $120 million plus exit fee, plus you're losing your TV money tied to your sports media rights all the way through 2036. Now, unless you can find a legal loophole to get you out of the grant of rights, which nobody has been able to find for more than a decade, remember, this is not a brand new thing. It's been around for a long time in the ACC and other leagues. I don't see any legal magic wand as somebody who has been an attorney since 1994. And if there were an obvious loophole, well, guess what? Somebody would have left already.
Yeah, and they have already been one. Yeah, that was the thing that I was saying.
They could still leave. They would just be jumping into a great unknown where you got to pay $120 million, and you may be leaving behind seriously $300 to $400 million worth of your future revenue, which, remember, it raises the question, what league wants you if that league is not benefiting from your media money?
Bingo. And that's where I was heading.
2036.
That's like, why would the Big 12 want FSU if they can't even they can't even sniff TV money for another 13 years? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter what Florida State wants. That's the thing I keep telling people. They can want to leave all they want. They can't. Like, they could, but why? It would be the dumbest move to leave that money on the table.
And there's massive financial repercussions for leaving. There's all kinds of crazy scenarios, Des. I mean, remember, if 8 of the current 15 members of the ACC wanted to just dissolve the conference, they could do that. That's one way out of the grant of rights. Oh. But that is an extreme position where 8 schools would have to know their new home.
Right.
You'd have to have 2 getting invitations from the Big Ten, 2 more getting invitations from the SEC, 4 more knowing that they'll end up in the Big 12. If that happened, that is an extreme possibility. But Florida State is so just on edge about all of this that they are examining every legal possibility, every creative possibility, like the dissolution of a league that's 70 plus years old. So you never say never, but I think the status quo, it's been 10 years that people have been telling me Florida State was leaving the ACC. You could Google 2013, Florida State threatens to leave the ACC. I'm not kidding. So we're 10 years into this, and I feel like the calm guy in the middle of a parade or a stampede saying all is well, all is well.
We're okay.
It's not all is well. We know that because of the finances, but it's also probably not about to fall apart. And in fact, the ACC may even get bigger depending on how these expansion talks continue.
Here with David Glenn from the North Carolina Sports Network. You can go to ncsportsnetwork.com. The David Glenn Show is back, so you can definitely check that out in podcast form over there, along with his long-form articles and more, and bi-weekly guests for us here on Franchise Players on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. I was getting to the expansion talk. Speaking of conferences you never thought would have imploded, at this point last year, I don't think anyone would have guessed that the Pac-12 would not exist, basically, after this, but you got Cal and Stanford kind of just sitting out there, and the ACC's kind of sniffing around them. Add an SMU, which would be a Texas market. Give me the pros and cons of them coming in or them not coming in. Because for me, my original thought was, well, what about the non-revenue sports? You're going to send women's volleyball, like Carolina women's volleyball, to Stanford on a Wednesday night in February for a regular season game. Like, you're going to end up spending the money you think you're adding from expansion in the first place from ESPN. Then I heard it's just football and men and women's basketball. And I was like, okay. And the rest of them, I don't know what they would do with the other non-revenue sports. But if it's like that, football's fine. It's once a week. It's just like NFL. Like, I mean, you could be wherever in the country. That's fine. Basketball, they're playing twice a week. They're already flying all over the country pretty much anyway. That's kind of okay too. But the other sports, track, soccer, lacrosse, like the non-revenue sports, they were going to get affected by this the most. But when I heard it's just those 2 large generating revenue sports, I'm a little bit better with it. And I've never been against expansion for the ACC. I've been against dissolving the ACC, like this whole thing crumbling apart. I've just been totally against this idea that they are one Carolina decision to go to the Big Ten away from just completely imploding or whatever. But what are your pros? Let's start with the pros first. What are the pros of adding teams from the state of California and Texas to the Atlantic Coast Conference?
One of the pros would be more money. Not enormous buckets of money, but ESPN, for example, is contractually bound to pay the Atlantic Coast Conference tens of millions of dollars for every new school. The exact number is hard to pin down, but for example, if you added Cal and Stanford and SMU, that is $70+ million in new TV revenue. Now, once you start, remember, you'd have to divide the pie 17 or 18 ways instead of the current 14 or 15 ways, right?
Yeah.
So every new member would have to bring more money than they cost as an additional mouth to feed. What's been interesting is that SMU has told the ACC, we will come and accept no TV money for our first 7 years.
Why would they do that? I've wondered that myself.
Because they want into we call it Power 4 now, that the Pac-12 has imploded. That league, it hasn't always been around in that name, but a nucleus of schools have been together since 1905. And because they failed to get a good new TV deal, just like the TV money is part of the ACC's problem, they signed that below market deal all the way through 2036. Mm-hmm. So while these other conferences are getting new deals to reflect the new marketplace, those dollars are much bigger. The ACC signed that incredibly long-term deal, and there's no doubt that ESPN got the better of that deal, got the ACC at a below market rate. Right. That's part of the problem. Well, the Pac-12 was in an even more desperate situation TV-wise, and that's why they fell apart. Everybody started looking for a safer place to land. And, first it's UCLA and Southern Cal out the door to the Big Ten. Then it was Oregon and Washington out the door to the Big Ten. Then others jumped to the Big 12. And the Pac-12, whether they keep that name or not, they're no longer a power conference, period. Yeah. So we're down to 4 power conferences. SMU is essentially trying to buy its way into a power conference, because when you say, I won't take any of your TV money, the current ACC schools say, well, wow, that's $200 million plus that SMU is foregoing if we let them in. Wow. Well, guess what? You get to divide that $200 million plus over the next 7 years among your existing schools who are all desperate for new money.
Did I not hear Stanford say the same thing? Stanford
similar? And Cal are saying we can't come in at 0, but they're being realistic. They're saying our other options right now are not very good, whether it's hooking up with the Mountain West or the American Athletic Conference. Those TV dollars are so small. They're saying to the ACC, we'll come in for $7 to $10 million a year. Even if you all are making $30 to $40 million, we'll come in at a partial share. And what does that do? That allows the current ACC members who are all desperate for new money to close that financial gap with the Big Ten and the SEC. Well, now they're dividing that money. Now, it is not the kind of windfall, Des, that all the current ACC schools, we're not talking about like $10 million a year in new money per school. It's not that level. But the TV partners like it because you'd add a fourth TV window. The Atlantic Coast Conference would be playing noon games, 3:30 games, 7 o'clock games, and 10 o'clock games. Yeah, with the West Coast. So that helps the TV partners stay happy. Those partial shares and 0 shares kind of buy the ACC time. So if they're all coming in at partial shares, at least for the rest of the current decade, you're paying the current members more than you otherwise could, and you're getting closer to that 2036 time. The next time the ACC can renegotiate its TV deals, will all this be enough to keep Florida State and Clemson happy? Probably not. You probably know, but it takes 12 votes out of the current 15 ACC members to pass an expansion candidate. They have been stuck at 11 to 4 votes. It's been Florida State voting no every time. And when I say voting no, I just mean not an official vote, just conversations like straw polls. Yeah. Hey, what would you vote if it comes to an official vote? Florida State keeps saying no. Clemson keeps saying no. UNC keeps saying no. And NC State keeps saying no. So there's at least 4 consistent no's. If you have 4 no's, you don't expand. But you got to turn any one of those 4 schools. All of a sudden, 11-4 is a no, but 12-3 is a yes on expansion. So you only need 1 new vote. At what point, and it's complicated, man, they're not only arguing over how to divide the new money. Florida State and Clemson want a part of revenue sharing to reflect TV eyeballs. That has never been the case in 70 years of ACC history. It has been much more equal revenue sharing. Yeah. Clemson and Florida State are saying we're the only schools in the ACC that draw an average of 3 million plus for our football games on TV. There are some ACC schools down at 1 million or so. So Seminoles and the Tigers are saying if we get literally 3 times the average TV audience than the smallest ACC football member, why don't we get more of the financial pie, given that TV money makes up most of that pie? They also are arguing for a form of revenue sharing that basically rewards performance on the field or on the court. So again, instead of 14 equal slices of the pie, and then right now Notre Dame's kind of that odd partial member, it would be some things are divided equally, but other things are divided based on how big a bowl game did you get to? Did you make the college football playoff? Did you make the NCAA basketball tournament? How far did you get in the tournament? So more performance-based money distribution rather than the old-fashioned split the pie equally. All of that is being merged into the expansion conversation. It's all about dividing the money, and it's an obviously close call if it keeps coming in at 11-4.
And I feel like my team, Carolina, is going to be the one that flips if it goes down, because it feels like without Carolina, there is no ACC. And that's not a homer take or anything. It feels like if you don't have North Carolina, it's not really the ACC anymore. And like, it feels like everything kind of is going to revolve around them. I know they make more money than any other school in terms of like branding and that kind of stuff. Carolina's not hurting for money. So it's like, it's one of those situations where they're kind of like, well, how does this benefit us? It could benefit us. Do we want to expand? My thing would be, though, if I'm a team like North Carolina or a school like North Carolina, and I see Cal and Stanford trying to come in and SMU, and I've got Notre Dame on the outside of the fence basically screaming at us to do it. Like, they're the main ones that are pushing for us to do it, and you're not even in the yard. Like, you're not even in the conference. I would be like, okay, we'll vote yes for Cal, Stanford, and for SMU to come in, but Notre Dame, you got to come too. Like, it's time. Come on, we'll figure this out. We'll work it out. NBC, ESPN. You're already in the conference for every other sport anyway. Like, I get it. You've been independent for over 100 years. This is a new era. Like, when they expanded the college football playoff, I felt like it damaged the opportunity for the ACC to bring in Notre Dame, because now Notre Dame can still kind of get in without needing a conference championship, whereas before they needed that path, and they lost it in 2020 when they could have convinced them then, when Clemson and Notre Dame both made the college football playoff with Notre Dame as a full-time member that year. They should have closed the deal then, but they didn't. So I would use this opportunity now to try to do it. Would Notre Dame do it? I doubt it, but at least try. I'm coming around on it more so, but the whole thing, just
Notre Dame won't do it.
I don't think they would ever do it.
And this is fascinating. We could write a book on who has leverage in what way with this current ACC expansion conversation, because Notre Dame has loved its independence for 100 or whatever years. And they've always said in recent decades, as long as our TV deal with NBC remains lucrative, which it has been, it's up for renewal soon, but they believe they're going to get another lucrative deal. As long as we have a home for our other sports unrelated to football, which they do thanks to the ACC, and as long as we have an avenue into that postseason version of football, which they do even with the soon to expand playoff, they're still incredibly happy with their independence. So you're right. Notre Dame is actually leading the charge on expansion, which upsets some people. It's like, why does Notre Dame even have a vote?
Yeah, what are you doing?
but Notre Dame a decade ago wouldn't have even joined as a partial member unless they had that full vote on expansion issues. So, it's, Clemson, Florida State, UNC, and NC State, the no votes, their leverage is you guys don't get to expand unless you rewrite the rules, the financial rules, the way we want them written. And, of course, the schools that are already voting yes, they have their own forms of leverage in different ways, but they would feel protected. The 11 schools voting yes on expansion would like the idea of 3 new members just in case Florida State decides to go and just roll the legal dice and go independent for a while or some other creative plan, right? We'll see how that shakes out. But the 11 schools voting yes don't want to see the ACC fully disintegrate the way that the Pac-12 has essentially disintegrated. And they just feel safer if they were to become an 18-team league, 17 plus Notre Dame, if you want to call it that.
It feels like the Pac-12 implosion, it almost opened the eyes of the ACC, because it almost felt like they were sleepwalking a little bit here the past couple of years in terms of expansion, watching the SEC expand with these huge brands, Oklahoma and Texas coming in there, watching what the Big Ten's doing, watching what the Big 12. The Big 12 was almost left for dead, like wasn't even that long ago. But
they've scrambled. They've scrambled,
and now they're at the table again.
Hey,
so,
Des, you know what's really scary is there have been conversations years ago with the likes of Texas becoming an ACC member. Those conversations were casual, nothing official, nothing all the way to a vote, but casual conversations. I know they happened. Of course, nothing occurred from that. There were conversations less than a year ago on the ACC adding several West Coast teams, like before Oregon and Washington committed themselves to the Big Ten. Your point earlier about those weird travel costs, we have the benefit of hindsight, but I think a massive missed opportunity would have been, hey, if you're freaked out because of these financial deficits compared to those two other leagues, and you're freaked out by the possibility of having to travel so many of your non-revenue teams coast to coast, why not just add 6 West Coast teams?
Yeah.
I mean, Washington and Oregon were very valuable football properties. When you just look at who draws TV audiences, they're kind of like the Florida State and Clemson of the Pac-12 when it comes to drawing football TV audiences, which is the tail that's wagging the dog right now. There was an opportunity, if the ACC was a little more aggressive, go ahead and add Oregon and Washington and Cal and Stanford and whoever else you like, and then draw your schedules in a way that your 6 Western friends mostly play each other, right? And then only some travel coast to coast. You would minimize the coast to coast travel by having these 6 members way out there and these 14 members here. Obviously, you're a super conference at that point, but if that's where all this is going anyway, you might as well have just taken a bite of the apple yourself and found yourself in a more secure place.
It feels like that's exactly what's happening, and that what will end up happening is that instead of being at the front of the buffet line, they kind of walk to the back of it, and they're just kind of like, we'll just wait and see what's left when everybody comes through. And now they're seeing it's like old potatoes and like stuff that nobody necessarily wants, but they haven't ate. So they got to put something on their plate. So I got to get DG out of here. He'll be back in 2 weeks. Go check out their stuff. Brand new sports network here in the state of North Carolina. I love it. ncsportsnetwork.com. The David Glenn Show is back in podcast format. You can catch it over there. Go subscribe to their YouTube channel as well, that they had launched this summer. DG, love having you on, man. Have you back in a week after next. So enjoy your
Love being with you, Des. Always appreciate the invitation. Keep up the good work.
Coming up, prep beat writer Marc Pruitt joins us to go over the top 3 high school football games in the Triad this Friday. I got a feeling that this team over here might be one of them. We'll be back in just a bit. You're watching and listening to Franchise Players, WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome back into Franchise Players, our season premiere here on WWBG 1470 AM as part of your TGI Friday lineup. You can also catch us on WTOB 980 AM, 96.7 FM Friday evenings throughout the high school football season. We're entering into week 3 of the high school football season here in the Triad. So I've been looking for someone to take over what we've affectionately called the Joe Serrera chair. And if you're familiar with this program, longtime friend Joe Serrera basically would bring us home during high school football season in our last segment on Fridays, where I'd bring him on and we would basically discuss Joe's 3 biggest games in the Triad for that week that he had written an article for every week for the Greensboro News and Record and the Winston-Salem Journal. Joe, bless his heart, retired after the end of this past school year, moved to Florida with his lovely wife, and he's enjoying retirement there. So it left open this hole, and I've been trying to figure out who I wanted to come in and try to fill the shoes of Joe Serrera. And Marc Pruitt was one of the names that kept popping up. And we've crossed paths a couple of times over the past couple of weeks. And we were out in Clemens partying with West Forsyth on a Wednesday night during Coach Wallace's coach's show, Titans Talk. And I invited him on for this. So prep beat writer Marc Pruitt joining us for a little bit of a high school football preview. What's going on, Marc?
How's it going, Des? Big shoes to fill with Joe. I actually spoke to him yesterday morning for a little bit, so he is doing very well down there, enjoying the Florida life. So
yeah, I imagine so. And me and JP Monday would joke all the time that Joe is like a North Carolina high school encyclopedia. He could rattle off a name of a kid from like 25 years ago that played for Dudley, and like it was just amazing. But I wanted to continue on the Joe tradition of picking the 3 biggest games in the Triad for this Friday. Of course, Mount Tabor and Page already played yesterday. So give me one I think I have an idea for 2 of them that you're probably going to do because they're games of the week on Tobacco Road. But give me one of the ones, the first one that pops into your mind here.
Well, let's start at the top. I think Grimsley is probably the best team around this area. Traveling to Pofftown to take on Reagan. Reagan's gotten off to kind of a slow start, 0-2 with a really young team, but they have a lot of talent at skills position. Josh McGee had told me back at a 7-on-7 earlier this summer that skills-wise, he thinks he's as good as he's ever been. We're just young. So quarterback Jacob Smith, Jalen Moore, who ran wild last year as a freshman. They do have some pieces. Landon Callahan, one of their defensive back, he's a kick returner. He's committed to Duke. He also he's just kind of all over the field for them. And Cassidy Harvin as a wide receiver. They lost a tight one last week at Mooresville. Had a chance to win in the end. Coach McGee went for 2. They didn't convert and ended up losing the game 14-13 to a pretty good Mooresville team too.
Oh,
so,
wow. Yeah. I didn't realize that's how that game ended.
Yeah, it was tight pretty much all the way, real low scoring. And something about Reagan and Grimsley, I think, bring out the best in each other. I know the last 2 years, Reagan's had a lead late in the game.
Mhm.
I know they lost 40-34 last year. I think it was 21-19 the year before that. So I think Coach Brown and Coach McGee have, maybe they have each other's numbers, or they know which buttons to push, or kind of know what they're going to be doing scheme-wise on both sides. But Grimsley's just loaded everywhere. I saw him play week 1 against Mount Tabor, which was a really close game until about midway through the third quarter. I think Grimsley just wore them down with all their weapons. Faison Brandon has really stepped in and had a pretty great year. And we have to consider, Friday night's going to just be his 3rd high school varsity start. Kid's already thrown for 360 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's got 158 rush yards and 3 touchdowns. And of course, we got to talk about his receivers. Alex Taylor's committed to UNC. Terrell Anderson's committed to State. Terrell's also a weapon in the kick game. And I think his kick return to start the second half against Tabor in week 1 really gave Grimsley a bunch of momentum in that one. I think he took it down to about the 10 or 9 yard line. So Grimsley had a 1st and goal and ended up punching it in. And I think that kind of got them rolling on offense.
Didn't he do that week 2 to open the second half? Didn't he run back a kickoff?
He may have. I don't know. But they just torched Rollsville, a really good Rollsville team that beat Butler in week 1 at their place. So that score, I wasn't surprised Grimsley won the game. I was surprised at the amount of points they put up and then the score of that game. So
63 on anybody is going to be an eye opener. I do agree, just from what I've seen from afar, because I'm the voice of East Forsyth. So I'm always with East Forsyth on Friday nights. Right. But what I've seen so far from Grimsley, it feels like the main weakness they may have, and if you even want to call it a weakness, would be at quarterback because of the youth of Brandon. But I mean, hell, he's like the 6th rated quarterback in his class or something nuts. Like, so it's not like
he's getting it done. And that's one of the things I really wanted to look at week 1. And he had a really good week 1. I think he had 2 touchdown passes and 2 runs. And then, of course, I don't think we can talk about Grimsley without talking about Mitchell Summers.
I was just about to get to him.
Went smack crazy last week, 6 touchdown runs. He's an impressive. He's just a junior. So pick your poison with Grimsley, and then Big Bryce Davis anchoring that defensive line. He had a monster night at Tabor. I know he had, I think, 10 or 12 tackles. He had an interception, forced a fumble that night. Grimsley they're young and they're good and they're really good at the skills positions, and they're just going to be a tough out with whoever they face. And I think, for my money right now, I think they're the best team in 4A classification in the state. I think Weddington is in that conversation as well. And I think East Forsyth's getting in that conversation at this point of the season too, with the 2 impressive wins they put up. And we're going to get to them in a couple minutes.
We'll get to the Eagles here in just a sec. I agree. The first Tobacco Road Sports Radio poll came out this week. We'll have one each week. And our poll's a little unique because we have a rotating panel of voters. What we try to do is we take the guys that do play-by-play and color commentary here at Tobacco Road. So there's like at least 5 or 6 of us. Mark participated in it. Bryant Roach from the Winston-Salem Journal, Greensboro News and Record participated in it. I might get Dave Pulaski to vote on this. He's one of the guys over at WSJS that calls high school football for them over there. And just I want like a a variety of sports personalities in the Triad for us to have like one poll that all of us are kind of voting on, just to get an idea of where everybody thinks. So I might invite John Johnson from WXII, a couple others just from different media outlets in the area, to just simply vote on the top 5 each week. And Grimsley, of course, came in at number 1 this week, East Forsyth 2, Dudley 3, Reedsville 4, and West Forsyth at 5. West Forsyth surprising 2-0 under new head coach Kevin Wallace. And you were out with us at Mossy's on Wednesday night for Titans Talk. And I gotta say, man, I think they have hit some kind of spark or something. There's a different vibe going on over at West right now that it's palatable. You can feel it.
Yeah, there was a lot of excitement. I know when Coach Wallace came in, I was there covering the announcement of his hiring for the Clemens Courier at the time. And I've known Kevin for a while. I knew him. I had a relationship with him when he was at Northwest Guilford. When I wrote for a newspaper up in northern Guilford County at the time too. So I covered him and his relationship with Coach Westberg at Northern. Kevin has got one of the sharpest minds. You know, football, yeah, but he's a sharp dude. I mean, he's got his doctorate. And I asked him, I think the first question I asked him once that was official was, do I call you coach or doctor now? And he just laughed at me. So he's very smart. The kids, I think it was interesting in the beginning trying to buy into the kind of the fresh feeling of the program. Because Coach No was a beloved figure in Clemens.
Yeah.
And 15 years at the same place, you kind of, you get used to that environment. You get used to his coaching style. And Wallace comes in, and it's just a different kind of energy. We all know he loves to throw the ball based on, teams at Northwest and what they're doing and what they're continuing doing. I mean, Tanner's having a really good year right now for the Vikings. But Kevin he's just an impressive guy. And then you could see the energy level last night with all the people there.
That was the biggest crowd we've ever had for Titans Talk.
And I was at several of their 7-on-7s over the summer. And I think to me it was important to see them. I wasn't at the AC Reynolds game. I was at the Grimsley-Tabor game the first week. I was at Oak Grove game because I figured that would be a pretty good one because Oak Grove's a really good 2A team.
Beat up on them last year.
Yeah. And they just responded. They got I think they got out to a lead, and then Oak Grove kind of punched back, got the lead, and went back and forth for a little while. And then in the fourth quarter, they got the big field goal block from Sean Davis. Chaplin came in. He didn't play in week 1 with AC Reynolds, and I think that was probably I think you saw the spark that he provided to that offense by going for 255 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Not bad.
Yeah, he lit it up. And West has a huge offensive line. I was telling Coach Ben last night, they remind me of the 2019 team when Jamani Wilson and Zaire Dillard both ran for 1,000 yards that year. I think Jamani set the single season rushing record that season. But he has some big boys on that group, including Jared Wilson, who's now at Georgia, has won 2 national championships with the Bulldogs.
Not bad.
Jared's little brother, PJ, is a sophomore starting right tackle on this team. So, and then Desmond Jackson is already committed to Carolina. So they got some big boys up front, and they really opened those holes for Kamen the other night. And I think you're going to continue to see that. And then, Coach Wallace, I'm sure, will work in some mastery of the passing plays with.
I'm sure that's going to, It's kind of the CPC's kind of flipped upside down right now because you've got a new coach at Reynolds and Joe Davidiak. I think
a lot of energy.
Parkland is 2-0. I didn't even realize it. I didn't see who they played, but just the fact that they're 2-0 after the past 5 years that they've gone through is remarkable. West is undefeated. And then you got East Forsyth. The more things change, the more things stay the same, I guess you could say, because they look really good, Mark. Give me
that was what I think the first note I wrote down was new look, same results. They lost so much from that team last year with Jalen and RJ Brown and Nick Martin and I could go on and on. Quayshawn.
All these D1 kids that just graduated.
And I've learned in my 18, 19 years of doing this that you never doubt Todd Willard. I wasn't sure how good East Forsyth would be, and I'm going to see that with my own eyes Friday night, and I'm going to be at that game. But Bryce Baker comes in and he's an instant difference maker for this group.
Man.
And he's looked really good from all I've heard, and I'm looking forward to seeing him play in person.
I don't
Friday
know.
night.
I don't know if East has had a quarterback since I've been back with him since 2018, and that's been that pocket's been the real success period for Willard and company over there.
Yeah.
I know they've had some quarterbacks, Ty Lyles, Jalen Rayner.
Yeah.
They've had dudes back there, but they were almost run first type quarterbacks where they could throw. Rayner really excelled at that senior year. Bryce is not a run first quarterback at all. Like he does not like to run, period. But he doesn't have to because he's got one of the prettiest arms.
Yeah.
You got to kind of see it because at first you're a little skeptical about it until you start watching him play. He's in so much control of that offense. East Forsyth ran for like 40 yards last week, Mark.
Yeah, and that's crazy. I was looking at all that, and I was like, wow. So, and he's spreading the ball out.
Well, a lot of it too. Me and Rod were talking about it because we'll have that game, East Forsyth based Reynolds on WTOB and Tobacco Road Sports Radio later on tonight. We were talking about it, and Rod was like, well, they did a lot of those quick snap and shotgun smoke to the left, smoke to the right to like a running back or whatever that's spread out. Like, so those short passes and then those jet sweeps where like the guy's running through and he just kind of like pitches it up and the guy catches it in front of him and goes, I guess that counts as a catch. So they were running the ball, but not exactly running the ball. But that was eye-opening to me that East Forsyth, which normally will run for 300 yards on you, like intentionally, they're not having to do that, which is pretty scary because they've got a set of wide receivers too. Josh Alston, Caldwell, you'll see him here in a little bit.
I'm looking forward to it. I was out there. I know you and I were out there a couple weeks ago, and I got a chance to talk to Bryce and Nigel Gay. He's an impressive young man. He was really good in the interview I had with him, talking about the transition over there, how quickly he kind of got used to his new surroundings. And he said what helped him the most is a lot of the kids on the team he played Pop Warner with growing up.
Yeah,
so,
that's what I've been hearing too. That a lot of these kids decided to come to East to play that have been playing. I think Kernersville Raider, Pop Warner football as kids. Caldwell, Alston, Baker, Cobb Mitchell that came over from Walkertown too. So I mean, they've got kids. Jalen Murray came over from Reynolds, and a lot of those kids. Nigel Gay was on the Nest Tuesday night with us, and he was raving about Murray. Like we didn't know who this kid was when he showed up, and all of a sudden we saw him. We're like, who is this guy? Like they think he might be the best running back they have, but they've got 4 or 5 kids back there in that running back room. So I say all that to say East Forsyth in their first 2 games have scored 104 points and allowed 7. So
not bad.
Yeah. Anyone out there that was thinking East Forsyth was going to have a down year or they were going to have trouble replacing talent, they have not been paying attention to what's going on in Kernersville right now. So I'll just leave that at that, as East is ranked 4th in the class, 6th in the entire state going into this game. Who's your third game?
Third game, we can talk about West. You want to talk about West? You want to talk about Dudley and Hillside?
Oh, you know what? I think kind of West because they're playing Weddington on the road, and we had West versus Weddington 2 years on radio. I sent JP Mundy and Ryan Stone down there, and it was a different game than what I'm expecting this Friday. That was like a 0-0 score at halftime. Neither team could really score. Weddington eventually, I think, scored a touchdown and won. I don't think Coach Wallace has that game plan in mind heading down 77 to Weddington on Friday. What are your thoughts on that game?
I think this one's going to tell us how good West Forsyth is.
Agreed.
Or where they are. I mean, Weddington is a tough test. I think I mentioned earlier, I got them number 2 in I got number 3 overall in my all classification poll in the state behind Providence Day and Grimsley. They're loaded too. Tyler Budge, the quarterback, is really good. He's got a receiver in Keenan Jackson who's committed to Carolina. They had a really nifty 99-yard touchdown pass play last week, and they're beating the tar out of people. 89 points in the first 2 games, and the defense has allowed just 3. So, and here's a name you'll like. The leader of their defense is by the name of Thomas Davis Jr. Carolina Panther fans would recognize that name.
Yes,
and he
sir.
is every bit the linebacker his dad was, apparently. So Weddington is really good, and it's going to be a great test for Coach Wallace and the Titans. He can figure it out. I know Kevin well enough to know that he's going to try to figure this out. He shared with me a couple of things last night, some special packages he's putting in this week to see if he can kind of change it up. So I'm looking forward to see how that one goes for them, and talking to them about it afterwards.
I told them last night that if they keep on keeping on the way they are, we designed our WTOB schedule to be able to be flexed after like week 5 or week 6. So there's some matchups down the road. I told Ferg as they were leaving, hey, I want us to all get to the end of October, and I want an undefeated West Forsyth taking on an undefeated East Forsyth, because the last time we did that, we had 10,000 people at that game the last time.
That game, I still say, was the best high school football game I've ever seen. In 2019, right? That one?
Yeah. That's the year East lost to Reagan and they lost to West in the regular season. And then they went on and repeated in 4A. Ty Lyles and those kids were juniors on that team, Armani Marshall and all those. For me, it's between that one and it was 2019. East Forsyth Glenn. Went triple overtime. That game was at the Nest, and I remember because I think Rod was supposed to go on vacation or something. He was talking about leaving after the game, and he kept mentioning it at the beginning of the game, and then they kept going to overtime. So we were like, we're going to be here till like 2 a.m. at this rate, because it just kept going and going. There was drama. They had a female kicker at Glenn. They iced her. She kicked it and went straight towards the pot and just went straight down like right before the thing and ended the game in the third over. It was a nuts. I've never seen so many people at an East Forsyth football game in my life for that one. That one was pretty big. So we got a lot of good ones here. Keep an eye on the CPC, because like I said, it's kind of it's not as expected, because Mount Tabor and Reagan were highly ranked preseason coming in. They have both had very hard non-conference schedules. Reagan, they're about to play Grimsley and East Forsyth back to back after the bye. Like they'll have Grimsley this week and then bye, and then East Forsyth. Then they have Glenn right after that, and Antwan's got them kind of turned around too. So
I'm interested to see Glenn at some point this season. I don't think we can sleep on Tabor just yet. I think they are really, really good. They're really young as well. Quarterback Lane Albright's come in, transferred from Reynolds last year. He's having a pretty good season for them so far. Last week, I think, was their, they had a little bit of a breather with a 28-6 win against North Forsyth for the Page Cup rivalry. But Tyshawn Brown's got some guys over there. Everybody's going to talk about Snook Peterkin, the wide receiver, and he plays defensive back some too. Jadon Blair is a name to know around here. Secondary, already getting all the Power 5 offers. They'll mix him in at receiver some too. And he's just a junior. Snook's a junior. Coach Brown's got a lot of young talent over there. And their defense is legit. They remind me somewhat of the 2021 championship team defense. All those guys were seniors. But a couple of their brothers are playing on this team. Matthias Banks is one of those, whose brother Josiah was a standout on that team, and he's at the Army now, U.S. Army or West Point Military Academy, playing for them. So Coach Brown's got some guys over there. He's going to try to keep it tight, and I think he's got just enough skill position that I don't think we're going to be able to count Mount Tabor out in this conference race.
Man,
it's going to be good, and they come right out. I think everybody's going on bye after this week, and
it's not conference. Like, literally every school, like it feels like in the state, is on a bye except for North Davidson and Walkertown, because that's the game that was the only game we could find really. North Davidson's going to Walkertown next week. We're going to have that game across both WCOG and WTOB since it's a bye weekend. Everybody's off, and then conference play will start right after that. We'll have East Forsyth and Reagan as we come back from there, and Grimsley will start.
Tabor will come in against West on the 15th.
That sounds like a good one too.
That's gonna be a good one. That's Hall of Fame night. West Forsyth will be inducting their inaugural class to their Sports Hall of Fame, which is headlined by Chris Paul, and there'll be a lot of I think there'll be a lot of people at that game, a lot of interest in that game, and well deserved, because I think that'll kind of see where. I think that'll help shape the conference race as well, to kind of see which one of those two comes out on top.
It's early, but it's getting the CPC. Maybe they had a down year last year, because it feels like this year it's like a 4 or 5 horse race, maybe more. Things will start to thin out a little bit over the next couple of weeks, but Mark will be back with us next week, and we'll discuss that, including, like I said, North Davidson, Walkertown next week. We'll kind of get into that a little bit. And maybe pop around the Triad a little bit more. We didn't get over into Guilford County and talk a little bit more about what's going on at Dudley, Breedsville, some of those other places out that way. But Mark, appreciate you coming on, man.
All right. Thanks for having me, Desmond. Talk to you next week.
Everybody stick around. High school football coming up here. We are your high school football leader in the Triad. Not one, but 2 live games here for you tonight. East Forsyth hosting their home opener versus AC Reynolds. That's a 7 o'clock kickoff. Myself and Rod Funderburk, Chad Delp in the house over at the Nest in Cape Vegas. 7 o'clock pregame show over on WCOG, 1320 a.m., 105.3 FM. JP Mundy, Mike Fanning will be over calling Grimsley versus Reagan out in Pofftown. Pregame at 7, kickoff at 7:30. So you've got your pick there. We will see you next week here on Franchise Players.